My name's Scott McQuire. I work at Melbourne University and my research is really interested in the interaction between media and architecture, so Federation Square is of real interest. I think there's a couple of things that are interesting about the way the screen is integrated into Fed Square. If you think about large screens, you often think about sites like Times Square in New York or Shibuya Crossing in Shinjuku in Tokyo, and the screens are really high up and there's lots of pedestrians moving through. They're very crowded spaces. Now, one thing they did here was they put the screen facing away from the street, so it faces into a traditional urban space like a square. The other thing they've done, which I think is recognised around the world, is they integrated the screen into the built environment much more successfully. It's not just a plonked down television set, it's part of a building. And so it works really well in terms of running events here from that point of view. We've been involved in research projects with Federation Square for a couple of years, looking at linking up the screen in Melbourne with screens in other countries. And we've run some events with a partner in Seoul, in Korea, and it involved interactive artworks that audiences in both locations could SMS either messages or information to the screen, and they would affect what each audience then saw on the screen in their country in real time. One was a piece called SMS Origins, and that basically showed a very simple graphic of a map of the world, and you were asked to SMS your birthplace, your mother's birthplace and your father's birthplace to a particular number, and then it would map those three locations. And so what you would end up with, I mean, it's an interesting piece because it shows each individual contribution, but at the same time it develops the whole thing as a network. So it'll always be different, that piece, depending on who's in those spaces at the time and who's responding. And if you get a lot of responses, you see this really intricate network being developed which reflects where all of those people were born. And for us, that's really interesting commentary on the diversity of origins of people and where they come into in big cities today. The kind of feedback we get from audiences about that has also been really interesting. People not only say, yes, they're intrigued by doing it, that they like to have that level of interaction, but when we ask them, does it make you feel closer to the people in the other countries, you get very positive responses. You know, yes, in Korea, they were thinking about, you know, what it was like in Melbourne, or they felt closer to the people in Australia and so on. And one of the interesting, ideas for us is how can this kind of infrastructure be used to make a public space really public in the sense of interactions between strangers, to break down barriers between strangers, and that might be between strangers in this place, in Federation Square, but also in other places that can be connected up to it.
My name's Sanjay Fernandes. I'm a student at the University of Melbourne, and I was asked by my supervisor to help research a project called SMS Origins. SMS Origins involved one person SMSing their own origin alongside their mother and father's origin from a city or country, which would then be tracked on a map of the world. So you'd have dots being joined from each continent and each city back to Melbourne. My job then was to ask surveys of the people who took part in the process about how they felt about interacting with the screen in a public space and how they felt tied or a common bond with the people next to them who were doing the same thing. So it was very interesting in seeing how their response was to each other as much as to the screen itself. I felt that seeing people's origins on the screen represented a diversity within a very small space, and that's not something you often think about. It's like walking through an airport and trying to pick where everyone's from. There's so much diversity within an airport, and to see that in a public space in Fed Square is something quite remarkable, I think.